Imagine, if you will, a world where the ordinary becomes the extraordinary, where every corner lies with mystery and each shadow dances with untold stories. Here, time bends and reality blends with fantasy. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, welcome to the Emporium of Imagination. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, The Count, and today I'm going to read to you episode 4 of Alexander's Greatest Adventures. As James led Alexander out of the shadows of Steamreach, the quiet hum of a waiting carriage caught Alexander's attention. Standing beside it was a tall, polished automaton with brass limbs, its glowing eyes flickering as it acknowledged them. With mechanical precision, it bowed slightly and opened the carriage door.
Please step inside.
The automaton's voice echoed softly, a blend of mechanical and human-like tones. James motioned for Alexander to enter, and after a moment of awe, he stepped in and sat on the plush velvet seats. James followed, and the automaton closed the door, then returned to the front. The carriage lifted slightly, gears clicking as it moved smoothly through the streets. Alexander gazed out the window, watching the chaos of Steamreach fade as they passed into the Midway district, then into the high city. Crumbling streets gave way to polished stone roads and brighter street lamps, the city transforming before his very eyes. They soon approached the gates of the McAllister estate, where the automaton brought the carriage to a gentle stop and opened the door for them once more. James stepped out first, turning to Alexander. "We're here," he said quietly. Alexander hesitated, taking in the towering gates and sprawling grounds, feeling as though he'd stepped into another world. His heart pounded as he followed James toward the grand estate, a new beginning that felt both overwhelming and promising. The estate itself stood as a testament to both wealth and the wonders of steam engineering. The elegant yet masculine structure featured reinforced steam beams and copper-plated accents, blending traditional stone architecture with sleek industrial lines. Along the outer walls, pipes ran in a seamless network carrying steam and power throughout the property, quietly releasing bursts of vapor into the cool evening air. As they entered the estate, the grand doors were opened by two brass-armored automatons, revealing Catherine standing gracefully within the entryway. The warmth of her presence stood in contrast to the bold, efficient workings of the machinery around her, making Alexander feel for the first time a strange sense of belonging in this otherworldly home. For a moment, Alexander was struck by her presence. Her long, dark hair shimmering under the light, warm olive skin and regal, effortless beauty. Her deep eyes held a softness he hadn't seen in a long time, carrying a quiet strength that instantly eased the day's chaos and made him feel unexpectedly calm. Catherine smiled as she stepped forward, her gaze first falling on Alexander before turning to James. Her soft voice carried a note of concern. "James, is everything all right? You left dinner so abruptly." James gave a small nod, his face unreadable. "Everything's fine," he said, his tone steady, but with the edge of weariness. "This is Alexander." Catherine's warm gaze softened as she looked at the boy, silent and weary. There was no surprise in her expression, only a quiet understanding, as if she could see the hardship he had endured written plainly on his young face. "Alexander," she said gently, her voice as welcoming as the estate's warm glow. "I'm so glad you're here. Please, come inside. You both must be exhausted." Though Alexander felt out of place in the grandeur of the estate, Catherine's calm presence was like a balm to his frayed nerves. She extended a hand toward him, not a gesture of expectation, but an invitation, a silent assurance that he didn't have to worry here. Uncertain of what lay ahead, Alexander found it easy to follow Catherine's gentle lead. Though she didn't know what he had faced or what James had offered him, her quiet trust in her husband was evident. Inside the mansion, elegance merged seamlessly with mechanical innovation. The grand foyer was illuminated by massive chandeliers of brass and crystal, suspended from the high ceilings by steam-powered pulleys. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, adorned with slowly rotating gears embedded in the frames, which powered various mechanisms throughout the home. Pipes intertwined with the architecture, channeling steam to the automated servants and controlling the ambient temperature. The mansion was fully staffed with maids, butlers, and automatons, each performing their duties with precision like the gears of a well-oiled machine in motion. Catherine turned to a maid nearby, her tone warm but efficient. "Please, prepare the guest room for Alexander." The maid nodded with a small understanding smile and disappeared down the hall. James, standing beside Catherine, offered Alexander a reassuring nod. "You've had quite the day. You're safe here. Rest will do you good." Moments later, the maid returned. "The room is prepared, ma'am." Catherine placed a gentle hand on Alexander's shoulder. "Come along, let's get you settled." She led him down a quiet corridor with James following just behind until they reached the guest room. A soft bed awaited, freshly made with fine linens, and the room radiated with a cozy warmth. He had never known the comfort of a bed. The cold, unforgiving floors of Buster's warehouse were all that he ever had. As Alexander lay back on the bed, the events of the day rushed through his mind. The escape from Steam Reach, his strange meeting with McAllister, the warmth of Catherine's welcome, and the unfamiliar comfort surrounding him. But for the first time, he started to feel something close to peace. He thought about everything that had brought him to this moment, wondering if it was all some strange dream. But as soon as he closed his eyes, exhaustion overtook him, and he drifted into a deep, uninterrupted sleep. When Alexander awoke, blinking into the warm afternoon light spilling into the room, he was startled to realize how late it was.
"Afternoon, sir."
A voice beside him, gentle yet confident.
"Hope you slept well."
Alexander snapped his head to the side, his heart racing. A tall, polished automaton by his bed, its brass limbs shining and his eyes glowing warm as it looked down at him. "Afternoon?" Alexander muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The rush of events and the reality of a new day swept over him, filling his mind with questions. Where was he exactly? What was he supposed to do? But his thoughts were quickly pulled back to the present by the automaton's courteous bow. What are you?" Alexander said curiously.
"Begging your pardon, sir."
The automaton continued smoothly.
"I'm your joint assistant companion, though most folks just call me Jack."
Alexander blinked, still a bit thrown by the sight of the polished, drawn figure before him. "Jack?"
"Yes, sir."
The automaton replied, nodding politely.
"At your service. Here to help you with whatever you might need."
Before Alexander could respond, the door swung open and a second automaton, identical to the first, but with a brisker step, strode into the room.
"Well, looky here. Jack's starting without me, I see."
The newcomer exclaimed in a tone laced with a friendly challenge. The first automaton turned slightly, its glowing eyes narrowing.
"Now, I was just following protocol, Jack. No need to getting all riled up."
The second automaton crossed its arms with a knowing smirk.
"Riled up? I'm here to make our guests feel good and welcome with a proper touch of hospitality, which you seem to overlook."
Watching the exchange with the growing amusement, Alexander finally raised a hand. Hold on. So, which one of you is Jack?" Both automatons turned to him, grinning, and replied in unison.
"Why, I am."
The first automaton tipped its hat, or the closest it could get to the gesture, and spoke up.
"Well, just so you know, I'm Jack, first to serve Mr. McAllister. And I,"
added the second automaton, giving Alexander a small, exaggerated bow,
"am also Jack, and a right honored to serve. Now, I know it might get a little confusing, so
the first automaton gave a quick nod.
You might just want to call us Jack 1 and Jack 2. Yep, I'm Jack 2, if you please. Gotta say, though, I bring a bit more flexibility to my duties."
Jack 1 let out a good, natural huff, crossing his arms.
"Flexibility ain't all that necessary, Jack 2. Precision and reliability, now that's the hallmark of a good servant."
Jack 2 leaned closer into Alexander with a conspiratorial wink.
Now don't let him fool you. A little charm don't hurt none, wouldn't you say?"
Alexander chuckled, thoroughly entertained by the easygoing banter. He'd never seen anything quite like these two, and their spirited exchange somehow made him feel right at home in this grand, unfamiliar estate. Jack 1 adjusted his posture, his glowing eyes softening as he spoke.
"Now, sir, Lady Catherine herself saw fit to prepare you a fresh set of clothes."
He gestured with a polished brass hand towards a neatly folded outfit on the nearby chair.
"Picked them out just for you, wanting you to feel comfortable and proper in her home."
Jack 2 nodded enthusiastically.
"That's right, sir. Lady Catherine's got an eye for such things. Make sure you got the finest clothes, something a young gentleman like yourself could take pride in."
Alexander's gaze fell on the garments, their quality unlike anything he'd ever worn. The fabric was soft, and the colors were rich, but understated. The idea that someone had chosen these just for him brought a quiet warmth to his chest. Just then, a maid entered the room with a stack of plush towels and a bar of fine soap. Immediately noticing the two jack automatons lingering near Alexander, she raised an eyebrow and a faint smirk tugged at her lips. "Well, aren't we all hands on deck today?" she remarked dryly, setting the towels down. "I don't think the young man needs an entire entourage to wash up." Jack 1 looked slightly affronted.
Now, miss, we're here to ensure.
"Oh, just get out of here," she interrupted briskly, waving them off with a dismissive flick of her hand. "I'd say he's more capable of managing a towel without two brass watchdogs hovering over him." The automatons exchanged a brief, slightly outmatched look.
We'll be right outside if you need us.
Jack 1 managed with a nod to Alexander.
Yes, sir, just a holler away,
Added Jack 2, casting the maid a mildly disgruntled glance as they exited. The maid watched them go, then turned back to Alexander, her expression softening. "Those two are trouble," she remarked with a wink and a smile. "Lady Catherine thought you might appreciate a proper wash. The washroom's through here," she said, nodding toward the door off to the side. "Take your time. Dinner will be waiting for you in the dining hall when you're ready." Alexander, still a little taken back by all the kindness, nodded. "Thank you." With that, she slipped out, leaving Alexander alone in the quiet. He entered the washroom and took a moment to enjoy the luxurious shower, feeling an unexpected relief as he washed away the grime of the streets. Once he was clean and dressed in the fine clothes Lady Catherine had provided, he felt almost like a new person. Readying himself, he stepped out, taking a deep breath before making his way toward the dining hall. At the head of the table stood Lady Catherine, her calm, warm smile putting Alexander instantly at ease. "Good afternoon, Alexander," she greeted, her voice as gentle as he remembered. "I trust you slept well." He nodded, though his words caught a little in his throat. Yes, thank you, ma'am. And thank you for the clothes and the food." Lady Catherine laughed softly, the sound filling the room with warmth. "No need for ma'am, Alexander," she said kindly. "Just call me Lady Catherine. That will suit us just fine." Alexander looked up a bit surprised. "Yes, ma'am. I mean, Lady Catherine." She nodded in approval. "Perfect." Gesturing for him to sit, she watched with a gentle expression as he took his place at the table. Alexander reached for a slice of bread, and as he took his first bite, he realized just how hungry he was, savoring each taste. After a moment, Lady Catherine tilted her head slightly, taking in his appearance. "I see the clothes fit you perfectly," she remarked with a soft smile. Alexander glanced down at the fine attire, feeling both grateful and a bit curious. "Yes, they're just right. How did you know they would fit?" For a moment, Lady Catherine's eyes softened. "They belong to our son Jordan," she murmured. Alexander looked up, curiosity in his voice. "You have a son?" She paused, her eyes reflecting a distant sadness. "We did. He was just a little older than you when he passed." She offered a bittersweet smile. "You look to be about his size, and I thought they might suit you." Alexander's heart tightened at her words, feeling both the kindness and the quiet sadness that she carried. I'm sorry," he said, unsure of what else to say. Lady Catherine reached across the table, giving his hand a reassuring pat. "Thank you, Alexander. It was some time ago. But in a way, I think he'd be glad to see someone like you wearing them." He swallowed, feeling her reassurance settling over him. "Thank you, Lady Catherine," he said softly, touched by her openness. She smiled, her expression one of quiet strength. "You're part of our home now, Alexander. You're safe here, and there's no need to rush. Take things at your own pace." As Alexander glanced around the elegant dining room, a question rose in his mind, and he looked up at Lady Catherine. "Where's Mr. McAllister?" he asked quietly, with curiosity and a bit of awe in his voice. Lady Catherine offered a gentle smile. "He's in the meeting with the High Council," she replied. "He's often called upon to advise them, especially on matters involving his expeditions and his knowledge of the city." Alexander hesitated, then spoke again. Could you tell me more about him?" Her gaze softened as she considered how best to begin. "Of course," she said warmly. "James has always had a deep love for Eurocolydon. During the Great Wars, he was much more than just a soldier. His bravery and tactical mind led to victories people thought were impossible, and he became a symbol of hope for so many." Alexander listened intently, hanging on every word as the new picture of James McAllister unfolded before him. "When the wars ended," she continued, "Victor Steelhaven wanted James by his side to help lead the city." She smiled slightly as she noticed Alexander's eyes widen with awe. The head primus was almost a mythic figure in Eurocolydon, a symbol of authority and strength. "Yes," she went on, "Victor the head primus himself wanted James as his advisor. They had served together, and Victor knew he could trust him like no other. But her gaze shifted, touched with a hint of sadness. James is an explorer at heart, you know, she said softly, her voice carrying the faintest note of wistfulness. Our son Jordan would join him on expeditions, discovering artifacts, materials, and treasures in the wilds beyond our city. Those journeys, they were everything to James. Something he shared with our boy that I think he'd hoped would last a lifetime. She paused, her expression shadowed by quiet sorrow. But after we lost our son, James lost interest in the council's duties and politics. He wanted nothing to do with it. He shut himself away in his study for days, barely speaking a word, as though he had lost not only a child, but a part of himself. I waited, hoping he'd find his way back to us, but he seemed lost. She looked away, her eyes distant, as though reliving each silent, empty moment. Then one morning, he came to me and he said, we should take a journey, just the two of us. He wanted us to visit the places he'd taken our son, those old sites where they'd discover artifacts together, pieces of history that felt like pieces of them. Her expression softened, a faint, almost wistful smile crossing her face. We walked those trails, stood on the cliffs, watched the sunrise where they had. It was a journey we both needed, one that seemed to bring us back from the edge. And when we returned, I could see something new in him, a quiet strength, a resolve. He was still our James, the explorer at heart, but there was a fire in him, a determination to protect what mattered, not only for us, but for the city. Her gaze returned to Alexander for a moment. Her eyes held a glint of hope. From that day on, he remained with the council, not out of duty alone, but with a renewed purpose. He wanted to ensure that Eurocolydon remained a place of strength and safety, where families like ours could feel protected, even if he had to leave his own dreams behind. Alexander absorbed her words, realizing the new clarity that James wasn't just a powerful man, he was someone who had sacrificed deeply for the good of the city and its people. James truly cares about the future of the city, she said softly. His past may be one of battles and sacrifice, but beneath it all, he simply wants the best for Eurocolydon. She paused, studying Alexander thoughtfully. And perhaps he sees something in you that he values deeply, a potential he believes in, even if you don't understand why. The Council of Eurocolydon gathered, the chamber buzzing with subdued tension as the discussion shifted from trade routes to the conduct of those responsible for the city's protection. Victor Steelhaven, head Primus, listened intently while James McAllister observed, his expression inscrutable. Councillor Hawthorne cleared his throat, a faint, pained expression crossed his face. With respect to Iron Bear and his crew. Recent handling of the Vader incursion, I find myself compelled to raise a concern, he began, his tone measured and polished. While effective in their methods, the approach was perhaps rather brutish. Such displays, though swift, may not cast the most dignified light in the city's image. He paused, allowing the words to settle before adding a practical dimension to his critique. Moreover, based on the recent reports, the resources expended on Iron Bear's contract appear increasingly difficult to justify. The returns, admirable as they may be in some respects, seem misaligned with the levels of investment. Perhaps our resources could be better allocated toward individuals whose methods align more closely with the decorum and prestige we strive to maintain. Hawthorne's gaze drifted across the table, his words veiled yet unmistakable, questioning not only Iron Bear's suitability, but also the wisdom of continuing to invest in its services. It is, after all, a reflection on the Council to ensure that our representatives embody both the efficiency and the esteemed values of Eurocolydon. James McAllister made his gaze steady towards Hawthorne. I understand your concerns, but Iron Bear's protection has been indispensable. While his methods may lack refinement, they have proven effective in securing our routes and deterring attacks that could have far graver consequences for our city. Sometimes, results require a practical approach over presentation. He paused, addressing the council as a whole. Ensuring safety isn't always a polished endeavor. Yet, it's thanks to Iron Bear's commitment that Eurocolydon trade remains uninterrupted. Redirecting resources might compromise that stability. Councillor Greta, who was typically quiet, added with evident admiration, Iron Bear's kept those routes open where no one else could. He and his men held their ground through conditions no ordinary soldiers would endure. But Councillor Hawthorne folded his arms with a hint of disdain. Head Primus, he began, his voice laced with skepticism. Are we certain Iron Bear isn't taking more than his fair share? Surely a bit of oversight wouldn't hurt, he He cast a look around the table, his gaze lingering on James before returning to Victor.
Relying on mercenaries for such a crucial task may not be the best interest for our council,
he added, barely concealing his contempt. Victor's eyes narrowed, his voice darkening. Councilor Hawthorne, I hope you're not insinuating that this council or I lack judgment in hiring Ironbear to watch over our trade routes. His loyalty and services are beyond reproach. Hawthorne hesitated, his composure faltering slightly.
Of course not, Head Primus,
he muttered, though his tone remained guarded.
I simply believe that such a critical role could benefit from the discipline of the Iron Guard. It might be the best to leave tasks like this to those with more refinement and honor.
James, his gaze calm yet unyielding, leaned forward, his voice slicing through the tension with measured control. Councilor Hawthorne, it seems you have some lingering concerns about the handling of our trade routes, he remarked, his tone almost casual but laden with weight. Then his eyes shifted toward the shadows. He added, Perhaps you care to weigh in, addressing a figure in the shadows of the chamber. A low rumbling chuckle rolled across the room as the shadow shifted near the corner. Leaning casually against a marble pillar, Keegan Ironbear stepped into the light. A towering figure just shy of 11 feet, built like a mountain. Whispers among the council spoke of him as a legend, a man whose sheer size and strength had turned the tide of battles. Some swore he had the blood of giants in him. Others believed his ferocity was unmatched. His piercing eyes, full of unspoken stories and a glint of humor, scanned the room as he crossed his massive arms, exuding both calm and a formidable presence that needed no introduction.
Aye, General,
he acknowledged James with a respectful nod, his deep voice carrying a blend of warmth and amusement. Hawthorne's irritation was evident as he stiffened his gaze, flicking up to meet Keegan's imposing figure emerging from the shadows.
I wasn't expecting you to make an appearance here, Ironbear, he admitted, struggling to maintain composure. I don't question your effectiveness, but I do question the wisdom of entrusting such important routes to methods that perhaps lack discipline and refinement.
Keegan leaned forward.
Refinement, eh? Well, Councilor, you can I might not have a bonny set of manners like some here, but I get the job done. And if you're still in doubt, maybe you'd like to join me on the next patrol. A bit of fresh air, closer look might do you some good.
Before Hawthorne could sputter a reply, Victor interjected, his tone calm yet firm. Keegan, our trust in your efforts to keep the trade routes secure has not wavered. But tell me, are there any additional resources you may need to ensure the Western Pass is completely safe? Keegan inclined his head respectfully, his eyes glinting with gratitude as he looked between Victor and James.
The routes are sound, Captain, but a few extra hands may not go amiss with all the stirrings lately. No grave Thor, Verexian, or Raider will breach those routes as long as I'm standing watch.
Victor nodded approvingly. I'll see it arranged. Your vigilance is invaluable, Keegan. But Hawthorne's irritation spilled over, his face reddening.
Head Primus Steelhaven, he began, voice taut. I understand that decorum doesn't come naturally to certain commoners, he sneered, eyeing Keegan with disdain, but respect is absolute. Casual titles between council members and contractors only undermine the authority of this council.
Keegan grinned as he took a leisurely step forward, each footfall making the chamber floor tremble.
Oh, why? Well, Councilor,
he murmured, his voice low but amused.
I'll give the respect what it's earned, lad. You think me a brute, eh? Because I don't call you by your fancy titles.
Keegan chuckled, his gaze steady.
I am a brute, but a loyal one. A man who stands by those who've earned it. General McAllister and Captain Steelhaven, I'd follow them straight into the heart of Hades itself. They've earned their titles in blood.
He leaned in, a voice dripping in a growl.
How did you earn your title, Councilor? I ken your kind. Just a dried up piece of fruit wrapped in a fancy coat, sitting back while others do the fighting for you.
Keegan's gaze was steady and unwavering on Hawthorne. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth.
You see, respect isn't handed out like a walking, Councilor. It is earned.
Giving a wink as he spoke, Victor raised a hand, silencing the room with his steady gaze. Councilor Hawthorne, he said, his voice cool. Keegan and I fought side by side in the Great War under James McAllister, who served as our commanding general. Keegan was my subordinate then, and we bled together. Our bond was forged in battle, not politics, not decorum. He's earned the right to call me by whatever title he sees fit. Keegan nodding to Victor and James.
Thank you, Captain. Head Primus. Old habits die hard.
He gave a wink, clearly enjoying the discomfort his words brought to Hawthorne. Victor inclined his head. Indeed, old habits, friend. Hawthorne's bravado visibly faltered as he shrank back under Keegan's imposing gaze. His jaw tightened, but his voice came out strained, lacking the edge it held moments before.
Perhaps I may have spoken too hastily,
he stammered, glancing at Victor for support but finding none in the head primus.
I yield to the council's decision and your expertise, Iron Bear.
Keegan let out a low chuckle, folding his arms again, clearly satisfied.
Aye, well, sometimes the truth comes out a bit rough, don't it?
He said, a hint of a wink directed at Victor and James.
But glad you see we've come to an understanding, Counselor.
Victor glanced at Keegan, raising a brow. Anything else to report? Keegan straightened, a glint of mischief in his eyes.
Aye, Captain. Had an interesting chat at my tavern. An artificer was rambling, claiming he knew a place that might hold the most powerful artifact. Ancient, hidden, and worth a lifetime to find.
James' eyes sharpened. The Starcore? Keegan nodded, his tone serious.
Didn't call it by the name, General, but he spoke like he'd seen something real. This wasn't just tavern talk. If he's right, we won't be the only ones looking.
James exchanged a glance with Victor. We need to find him, Keegan. Arrange a meeting. If there's any chance, we can't ignore it. Keegan nodded.
Understood, General. I'll track him down.
The council chamber fell silent, the weight of the Starcore legend hanging over them. Victor, the head primus, spoke. If this artificer knows anything, we need to find out. No matter the risk. Wow. The story is getting interesting. Has the Starcore been found, or is this artificer telling tales just so he can get famous? Don't know, but I'm really looking forward to what's going to happen in the future here. Thank you all so much again for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate if you leave a like and a comment down below, letting me know what you're thinking of the story so far. What are parts that you would like to dive in deeper into the world of Eurocolydon, the lore, the legends, the myths, whatever it may be, comment down below. I'd appreciate it. I love all the comments. It will help boost the video in the algorithm so other people can get to know the story of Alexander's great adventures. I appreciate every single one of you once again for watching. I have been your host, The Count, and I want to wish you all a wonderful evening.